Tourism in Australia has been a popular platform for graphic designers to combine skill, produce for a global target audience, and create eye-catching and involving tourism campaigns. Throughout the 1930s, 40s and 50s, the modern design era was introduced, bringing in a fresh design approach to a world of post-war trauma in the recent plateau in a drive for creativity. The Australian National Travel Association is Australia's peak semi-government tourist body, which operated from July 1929 with a mission to place Australia on the world map and keep it there. Gert Selheim was a well-known accredited architect and graphic designer that was famously known for his work with Anta. Although not born in Australia, he left an impression on Australian travel through his well-known travel posters. His iconic work elevated Australian tourism to hit a global target audience. His work has inspired many travel campaigns, including the current travel campaign, Holiday Here This Year. Anta designer Gert Selheim utilised many modernist principles that arose throughout the 1920s and 30s. These design theories influenced and changed the way contemporary advertising was designed. Selheim was born on the 31st of September 1901 in Estonia. He passed in 1970. Selheim fought in the Russian Civil War from 1918 to 1920. His experiences at war carved a deep impression on his outlook on life and was a strong influence behind his bright and upbeat aesthetic, a harsh contrast to the colours, emotions and scenarios of war. Selheim studied architecture in places such as Berlin, Munich, Vienna, Graz, and Paris. He arrived in Western Australia in December 1926, basing himself in Perth. Selheim's architectural qualification was not immediately recognised when arriving in Australia. It was registered in Australia on 21st of May 1929, 3 years after moving. Selheim's son quotes that he was immediately inspired by a love for his new country. Selheim then became a site architect for the University of WA. In 1931 he moved to Melbourne and practised as an industrial and commercial designer, and then began designing posters for Australian National Travel Association. In the 20th century design era, modernism is a collective term, meaning the design movement designing for social change, using key principles such as form follows function, and using materials in their true form, departing from traditional methods and embracing modern ideation. Selheim's work embodies the changes and innovative design thinking that was associated with modernism. The modernisation of technologies and methods of design saw Selheim's work adapt and respond to change in visual language, thus designing for the machine age and changes happening in society. The term modernity has its origins in the series of economic processes, technologies, linguistics, visual and textual communication systems, and the progression of such things. Modernisation is a progressive, upward movement of technologies, methods, and design aesthetics, all of which Selheim embodied. Selheim's approach to posters in the 30s and 40s was ahead of his time, using techniques that elevated his poster design above and beyond the average propaganda and communication that had previously been designed. He encompassed techniques such as photo montage, a collection of photos, colour splashes, popping in a bright colour to disrupt the monochromatic background, drawing, a mixture of hand lettering and commercial type, diagonal type either curved or on an angle, and lithography, which was an old method of printing from stone or metal that uses the scientific fact that water and oil do not mix. Compared to works of Percy Trumpf, another Anta poster designer who uses more traditional illustrative styles and whose work flourishes with the rich detail and Art Deco style, Selheim uses modernist principles with a simplistic colour palette and loud shapes that stand out and engage an audience. His collage method creates hierarchy and shadow to embody three-dimensional objects, even though they are flat cutouts. Selheim's work promoted a real, rather than idealised vision of Australia. His work had the ability to entice overseas travellers to this country and in turn increase morale for Australian tourism. Part of his designs encapsulated the essence of the country. Take a Kodak and by train are swing tags that are promoting new technologies of that era. Modernism was a time for change in industry and the way things are made and what they are made from. Selheim believed it was something that was new, fresh, and a promotional angle that could entice overseas travellers. Selheim became notorious for his railway poster advertising for Australian Railway. His work embodied Australia's progression through the time and highlighted the new and improving technologies. This helped form a new and modern identity of Australia and how they were embracing modern society. His work does not impose an idealistic view of Australia, rather a naturalistic depiction. Although the people and imagery are stylised, it does engage an audience. He employs modern design elements such as contrasting bold colours that stand out. He uses modern principles such as focal point and modern typographic principles using hand lettering and type that is bold and enticing, drawing the viewer in and wanting to take the time to understand the promotional aspects of these posters. Selheim was able to stay true to the materials and create clean line designs that engaged an audience globally. Whilst many of his designs were targeted at creating larger profile for new technologies and materials, he also designed posters as a political and cultural response to the country. Part of his designs encapsulated the essence of the country, that being Indigenous culture. Selheim was a pioneer in utilising Indigenous imagery and had an intent on celebrating Aboriginal culture and their connection to land. Australian government attempted to increase American tourism in Australia during the post-war period until the early 1970s by drawing on the appeal of Aboriginal art imagery. Nowadays, this work would be classified as cultural appropriation and an insensitive representation of our native culture. This image poster, named Australia 1936, it aimed to promote Australia with reference to our settlement history, fauna, and landscapes. The anti-travel poster began the interest and intrigue from a global perspective into the landscapes and coastline that Australia has to offer. This can be accredited to the bright and enticing designs created by designers such as Selheim. Selheim's work had a huge influence on the current Australian tourism campaign. There are similarities between the current graphic designs used compared to those of Selheim in 1930. This image is the current Australian travel campaign, Holiday Here This Year. Similar techniques are being used such as a collage, flat lay, letter stamps and the use of contrasting bold colours. Selheim, along with the current campaign, aim to accentuate and celebrate the beauty and uniqueness of this country. Contemporary designs are now reacting to the environment and sustainability, unlike those advertised of the past. The technology and innovation that we have these days to produce worldwide travel campaigns is much greater and more advanced than the 1930s, but it is still amazing to see that some techniques and ideation are common threads throughout both campaigns. Selheim's work shows restraint, a balance in colour, title hierarchy, and the ability to adapt to a modernist society. His work emphasises key moments in design history, such as the innovation of public transport and new technologies such as the Kodak camera. Through his work with Anta, he was able to design for social change by bringing to light Australia's native culture and the uniqueness of the Australian landscape. Selheim created an identity for Australia to the rest of the world, encompassing modernist techniques that were not regularly seen in the 1930s. His work resembles the true essence of tourism in Australia.